So just before our next speaker, I was going to have everybody join in a couple of chants. Which one do we want to do first? Slam the gate? All right. I need to find it. This is terrible. All right. So when I say slam the gate, you guys say on G8. Slam the gate.
On G8.
Slam the gate.
On G8.
Slam the gate.
On G8.
Slam the gate.
On G8.
All right. When I say no fake lakes, you say safe fish lake. No fake lake.
Safe fish lake.
No fake lakes.
Safe fish lake.
All right. So our next speaker is Ana Linares. And she's going to talk about Canadian mining companies in Latin America and a specific struggle right there.
Thanks, everybody. I feel really proud to be out here with all of you guys, showing solidarity for our brothers and sisters in Toronto in resistance against the G8 and G20. So my name is Ana Linares. I'm a Salvadorian and Latin American activist. I'm a student at SFU's Faculty of Environment, and I'm also the president of Raíces Latin American Cultural Society. Today I want to share with you the impacts Canadian mining companies are having throughout Latin America on Indigenous and peasant peoples, on the environment, and on the social and cultural fabric of these nations. The Canadian mining industry is the largest in the world, with projects all over the developing world, and much of its outward investment targeting Latin America. Barrick Gold, Blackfire, Sky Resources, Hudbay Minerals, Gold Corp, and Pacific Rim Mining Corporation are just a few of the mining companies found throughout the Americas. Many of these mining companies' head offices are located right here in Vancouver. These companies are often transnationals and have been criticized for the role of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in privatizing the resources of nations and creating favorable conditions for these transnational mining companies at the expense of national sovereignty, as well as violating labor, environmental, and human protection rights. These companies are also politically backed by our dear Canadian government, including the Canadian International Development Agency, and financially supported with our public retirement funds from the Canadian Pension Plan and through other public funds with Export Development Canada. This is an ugly yet little known truth to most Canadians. But today I want to expose to you one case in particular, which hits very close to my heart. In 2002, Vancouver-based Pacific Rim Mining Corp obtained exploratory gold mining permits for projects in the Department of Cabañas, a rural and poor part of my homeland of El Salvador. They touted claims of social, quote-unquote, social and environmental corporate responsibility with so-called, quote-unquote, green mining techniques. It's a branding trend that has become commonplace with mining companies abroad. But the Salvadoran people knew that these claims were false. The Salvadoran people know that water is a scarce resource in their country, and the so-called green mining techniques claimed by Pacific Rim would, if not contaminate the water with cyanide, use up exorbitant amounts of the precious water that Salvadorians already have poor access to, second only to Haiti for least water accessibility in the Western Hemisphere. The Salvadoran people understood that the proposed gold mining projects would bring great social, environmental, and health impacts. And in 2005, the people began to educate themselves and mobilize. The people said, sí a la vida, no a la minería, which means yes to life, no to mining. And El Salvador became the first country in the entire world to say no to metallic mining on their lands. As a result of this resistance, there have been 3 assassinations of prominent anti-mining activists in Cabañas since the summer of last year. June 18th, 2009, Marcelo Rivera, a teacher and environmental activist, kidnapped, tortured, and murdered. December 2009, Ramiro Rivera, gunned down with previous assassination attempt in which he was shot at 8 times. December 26, 2009, Dora Recinos, 8 months pregnant, murdered in front of her 2-year-old child. What these 3 assassinations have in common is that they were all anti-mining activists opposed to Pacific Rim's presence in their community. And all of these cases remain under a state of impunity, and activists and their families, church leaders, and radio journalists continue to be kidnapped and threatened with death. In April of 2009, Pacific Rim filed an outrageous and shameful lawsuit against the government and people of El Salvador. They cited Chapter 10 of CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, for a minimum of $77 million in damages and up to hundreds of millions more for infringement of their quote-unquote potential profit rights. This suit is currently being pursued through the Center for International Settlement of Investment Disputes, a corporate tribunal of the World Bank in Washington, D.C. What is more disturbing about this suit is the fact that Canada is not a signer of CAFTA, and Pacific Rim has disgracefully filed this suit through a dormant American subsidiary. This is precisely the type of imperialist free trade agreement this G8 G20 summit hopes to create. So what's the point of my story? The point is that we Canadians, including myself, live in one of the greatest nations on earth. But this life of relative privilege and wealth comes at the expense of the exploitation and environmental destruction of developing nations such as my homeland of El Salvador. This is what I like to call the Canadian myth. It's an ugly truth that we as Canadians are implicit in, and one that I personally have increasingly become ashamed of and angered by. So what can we do to change this? For starters, I invite you to write to your MPs, write to your politicians, ask questions. Tell them you do not want our public funds, such as the Canadian Pension Plan, to be invested into these Canadian mining companies. Ask them to stop throwing political and financial support to Pacific Rim and demand that Pacific Rim respect the sovereignty and self-determination of the Salvadoran people. Support Bills C-300 and C-354. Educate yourselves and take action. Talk to your family, friends, and co-workers, and continue to support public rallies such as this one. Walk in solidarity with the Salvadoran people and all peoples in resistance against these Canadian mining companies abroad.